In this episode, we will discuss something that straddles scientific theories, clairvoyant knowledge, as well as sci-fi and fantasy. It is the Great Time War and Galactic Refugees. What am I talking about here? This is not Doctor Who, by the way. Although I so like this Galactic Time War, and it really was Galactic Time War, because time is ruled in fourth dimension, and those are four-dimensional wars. Keep in mind that in fourth dimension, wars are still very, very possible. On planet Earth, because we live in the fully incarnated 3D world, 4D means hybrid wars, cyber wars, info wars, etc. They're not hot physical wars. But in galactic terms, where everything is expanded, 4D wars are very possibly wars that are fought through very advanced military technologies that may become practically physically manifesting. They may destroy planets, they may destroy civilizations, and they may create huge refugee flows throughout the galaxy. And that's what happened. I am going to partially incorporate here the theory by Nikolai and Svetlana Levashovs. In Russian, Nikolai and Svetlana Levashovy. These are the two people. I'm just going to tell you very briefly who they are, and you're seeing their pictures right now. Nikolai Levashov was a clairvoyant healer, psychic. His wife was considered a very high-profile psychic. He actually swore by her, and he himself was also a professor and member of the National Academy of Sciences of Russia. So he's not just anybody. He didn't walk in from the street. He published many books, and his span of knowledge was pretty tremendous. Very, very impressively tremendous. He wrote about healing, about truth, multidimensional, he didn't call it multidimensional universe, but basically universe and how it works and how different dimensions work. Then he did a lot of work, incidentally, on Arctic Cruise Hyperborea, on the initial civilization that was Russian civilization. He dispelled all these untruths about Russia, and so did his wife Svetlana. Strangely enough, first Svetlana Levashov was killed, and then Nikolai Levashov died a strange death. However, Nikolai Levashov, I have to say, he gained a ton of weight. He was a very, very big, bulky, humongous, fat guy. Not initially. Initially, he was just tall and kind of slim in his own way. Then he started gaining weight. I think it coincided, and when I say gained weight, he was extremely, extremely big. And so that coincided, in my opinion, with a lot of bitterness developing in him. Then his wife got killed. I think perhaps that also potentially added to his bitterness. Possibly all the bitterness was already in there. He turned a lot darker. This is why I generally do not recommend them, but he had so much interesting stuff developed before he turned darker. And when I say darker, he became kind of nationalistic, even a bit fascist in his views. And I will talk later about this, how fascism, unfortunately, and on the dark side of Vedism, fascism arises. Nationalism and fascism. We can see this now in Ukraine. So Vedism only works, the knowledge only works when it's kept in the light, when you orient yourself towards the light, when you either afraid to do that or forget to do that, or when you're too bitter and offended, when you take personally what happened, then you start turning to the dark. And this I cannot condone when some Russian researchers say that Russians are everything, you know. Hitler and Germans said the same thing, and incidentally they drew on the same body of knowledge, same Vedic knowledge, except they turned it to the dark. Of course, Russians, being very magnanimous and very kind people at their core, they're only responding to how they were mistreated, how Russian history was maligned, shortened, mutilated, how Russian documents were burned throughout centuries and centuries, how black was made white and vice versa. They are just reacting as a knee-jerk reaction to all these tremendous, huge injustices that we have had for years and years. But no matter what, we have to stay in the light. no matter what, we cannot say that somebody is better than somebody else. We're all one. We are all contributing to this beautiful, great, huge tapestry of life together. So we cannot start pointing fingers in such a way that we ourselves become dark. And this is what I wanted to say. So if you start researching Nikolai and Svetlana Levashova, they did a lot of very good things, and they awoke a lot of people, and this is why I'm mentioning them here. But keep in mind that they turned to the dark in their later years. This is why I do not actually recommend them, but they are worth being noted and being mentioned. So the theory that Nikolai Levashov and his wife had was very interesting. They talked about this galactic time war that I just mentioned, and they said that the reason we have races on the planet, basically most people would say that there are 3 races, but sometimes 4 races are distinguished. The reason we have them is because there was this galactic war, and Earth, or Midgard, Gaia, accepted refugees from different worlds, which were running away from that galactic war. And so these refugees, the population of the Earth, welcomed them here and settled them in climates and on continents that were more to their liking, that were more in line with their worlds. Therefore, Africa was given to what we know as the blacks. Asia to Asians who had their own likes and dislikes and their own preferences for climate. If we are talking about Native Americans or American Indians, as they're also called sometimes, that is a much more convoluted issue, because I believe that that's a mix of several Russians and, let's just say, Asians. There could be additional mixes there as well. So I wouldn't say that that's a different race. And supposedly based on Nikolai Levashov's theory, that's how races appeared. And initially, according to him, these 3 races, they were not supposed to intermix and intermingle in any way. So they lived in their own continents, in their own realms that were designated for them. But I can tell you from the higher dimensional perspective that in order for consciousness on the planet to develop, we're not looking from his dark perspective that, let's all be separate. Russians should live here, Europeans should live there, or Western world should live there. Let's not mix. God forbid we mix. This is really silly. In order to expand consciousness, in order to experience life in all its facets, we're supposed to mix. We're actually supposed to be one. When something divides us, whether humans do it consciously or it happens unconsciously, the thing is that we are supposed to eventually go and remix, and we are supposed to compare our notes. We have to interact with each other. And it has been proven that genetic DNA of humans actually strengthens when there are mixed marriages. That's number 1. Number 2, like inbred, the word inbred, when the kings, royals of Europe were intermarrying each other, they became inbred. The same situation occurred with a lot of Jews, who also, like all kinds of Hasidic Jews, the Orthodox Jews, who, God forbid, you marry somebody outside of your immediate little circle. But that inbred situation causes genomic fund of the population, that the pool to weaken and to become more and more shallow. You actually need to pull in fresh blood, so to speak, from different cultures, from different races, and that's how more beautiful children are born. It happens very often. Very well established fact. For example, American forefathers, all kinds of Jeffersons and such, they actually had these extramarital affairs with slaves, with beautiful slave women. And the children that were born into those were beautiful, were gorgeous. And, at one point, these children, because they didn't fit into American society, true fact, they were in fact sent to Africa. A ship was dispatched. They were all collected, those who wanted to go, of course. And the country called Liberia was founded. Of course, local tribes lived there. And these children of this American royalty, quote unquote, who were blacks, but very beautiful blacks, they were strikingly beautiful compared to the native population. So the native population was in fact oppressed by them for generations. And you know, there were these events in Liberia when the population rebelled, and there were a lot of atrocities. They started raping all these women from this upper class there. A lot of them had to actually escape and run back to the US. We're talking generations later. Of course, that ship was dispatched sometime in the 19th century, if I'm not mistaken, possibly 18th. So point is that they were very beautiful children. I've seen their pictures. They're amazingly, strikingly beautiful. And we're talking generations after that mixing of blood has occurred. The point is that anybody who becomes arrogant and who forgets their true roots, forgets to be humble, they will be struck with karma. So eventually karma caught on to those ex-children of American royalty as well. So that's briefly what happened with the Great Time War and Galactic refugees. So we are at the point now, and we have been for the longest time, because, you know, you cannot contain people within one continent. People started mixing and intermixing. This is how we have, for example, in the south of Europe, we have people who are part Rus and European blood, and part they intermixed with Africans. In various areas of Asia, or I mentioned Native Americans and American Indians, these civilizations are also certain mixes, etc., etc. So that's what was supposedly, that's how races supposedly appeared. But the truth is that we need to look deeper into what the word race actually means. In Russian, it sounds as rasa. So race in Russian sounds rasa. Remember this, because in the next segment we will talk about that.